Okay, I know more people will be signing in. This is a very popular event with Dr. G. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone from all over the globe. My name is Joni Parsons. I'm co-creator of Revel 11, and we created Revel 11 about 5 years ago to have edgy, informative, meaningful, and fun events and retreats for women. And for all of the men in the room, welcome. We're very glad you're here as well. I met Brooke Goldner about 10 years ago. We just decided it was 10 years ago already, Brooke, at a women's retreat in California. And when I met Brooke, I was just so impressed with her personally, her mission of eating a plant-based diet. I remember you saying, Brooke, where are the avocados? And just, I've been so blessed to watch her career just blossom over the last 10 years. And I'm so thrilled that you're here today, Brooke. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I remember in that event that I ate just the salads because the other stuff wasn't for me. And they were great big salads because we were on a farm. And the only meal that was plant-based was before the biggest meditation. And that's so that your mind will be more clear and you'll be more connected. I'm like, shouldn't we be connected every day?
Every day.
Now Leila is a raw vegan whose event it was. So it was kind of funny. But yeah, it was, and I was, out to here pregnant with my son, Alex, at the time. So.
Isn't that amazing? It was such a beautiful event. And I remember all of those pieces. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my story because I think it's similar to yours, Brooke. As far as growing up, there wasn't a lot of talk about nutrition. I drank a lot of Coke, ate a lot of meat and dairy, in fact, at every meal, and ate tons of sugar. So, of course, I was a fat little kid growing up. I didn't learn anything about nutrition at all until later in life. And Brooke, I'd love for you to start by telling us a little bit about your story for all of those people who don't know and then just want to hear it again, because it's just such an amazing story of evolution in your health journey.
Absolutely. So, the first line of my book, Goodbye Lupus, I say I grew up with a personal chef, Chef Boyardee. So if you guys aren't aware of it, Chef Boyardee.
I know, here's her first book.
Yeah, he made these canned meals, and it was pasta, meat, sauce, sugar, chemicals. I don't know. But, I come from an immigrant family. I'm first born in America, first generation in America. My family, my mom came here on a boat through Ellis Island. My family was refugees from World War II who were starting over, but after my family having this experience of starving through the war, they were Holocaust survivors. They were obsessed with eating and keeping you fed, and food was just anything you liked, anything you liked. And I was actually always a really skinny kid. So there was really no looking at what I ate, because at the time, I was born in the 70s. If you were skinny, it meant eat whatever you want, right? That's
absolutely.
So there was no looking at food content or anything like that. And I loved processed food. So macaroni and cheese, Chef Boyardee. And I didn't like fresh macaroni and cheese. It had to be from the blue box, it had to be that processed cakey powder cheese.
That all kids love, right?
Yeah, well, once they get exposed to it, right?
Right.
So that's how I grew up, I think, like most people. But we didn't realize the impact that it was having. And even, my mom felt bad when she read that first chapter. That is not your fault. That's how everybody was raising their kids. You weren't trying to do anything that harmed me, right? But what happened was, by the age of 12, I started getting migraines. Migraines run in the family, but we still went to the doctor and had it all checked out. And it was a joke of the family that they did prove I had a brain, the MRIs and the CAT scans and everything else, but they couldn't find anything wrong with it. So I was given, medicine for pain, because they were bad migraines. I'd be in bed for a week, vomiting all day, just really intense. And then that was kind of it. And then by 16, I started getting pains in my joints, and it would move around. It'd be in one joint, another joint, and then swelling. And we were trying to figure out what that was from. Thought maybe it's an injury from sports, but I'm actually not really an athlete. I was on the volleyball team at the time, but I sat bench. So it wasn't like, I was really intensely playing. And then I started getting rashes. I had a big rash across my face. And then finally, the combination of, the swollen joints, the migraine, the rash, I was throwing up. It was after a date at the pool. my parents called my doctor and she met us at the ER, and she finally was able to put it all together that this was lupus. And lupus is an autoimmune disease where your immune system, instead of attacking an enemy like a virus or a bacteria, is attacking your own body. So it was causing the symptoms I was having between the headaches and the joint pain and the rashes. But what we also found out when I was in the hospital was that it was causing kidney failure. And kidney failure, that's a silent disease. I didn't have pain to tell me that was happening. But when they did the blood tests, it was pretty severe. My blood pressure was through the roof. And so the next day I'm getting a kidney biopsy. And the next day after that, I'm in a nephrologist's office where he actually said to my grandmother and my mother were with me. And he said that my kidneys were failing so quickly and I had the most aggressive form of lupus nephritis. Lupus caused kidney failure. It's called membranoproliferative, very difficult to say quickly. And it was stage 4 membranoproliferative nephritis. And he said, with the current treatments they had at the time, that he gave me about 6 months before complete kidney failure. And my mom said, what does that mean? He said, that means if she's lucky, she'll be on dialysis. And if she's not lucky, she won't make it. So
that's incredible. How old were you?
16.
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
I didn't have to imagine. I was there.
Yeah, I know. I was just saying that to the rest of the audience. I can't imagine, being 16 and having to deal with that. So what was the protocol at the time?
At the time, we didn't have all the fancy new medicines we have now. In my day, we didn't have Plaquenil and Silocept. So it was mostly high doses of steroids. And then most of the other medicines were to deal with the side effects of the high doses of steroids. So I took 7 different medications every day. And then what they decided to do, what my nephrologist was selling with that preamble of 6 months was that there was an experimental treatment they were using at the time, which was to use Cytoxan chemotherapy in lupus patients, specifically people with kidney failure, to try to shut down the immune system to save the kidneys. So, one of the side effects of chemotherapy that people will see in those with cancer is that they start getting infections, and they often will die from an infection because the side effect of the chemotherapy is it shuts down the immune system. So they thought, what if we do that intentionally? If it's your immune system that's attacking your kidney, maybe we can control alt delete this, or reboot, to use more modern terms, right? We can shut off the immune system and then let it restart slowly and see if maybe it'll stop. And so at the time they didn't know how much to use. So I was one that was kind of an experimental patient where they kept raising the dose every month. And they said they had to start low because if they started with the final dose, it would be deadly. So you have to work your way up to it. So I had, from 16 to 18, I was on super high doses of steroids. I was taking 7 different medications, some to suppress puberty because the chemotherapy could cause ovarian cancer and other things. And so they were trying to suppress my puberty and my menses and all this stuff. So I was taking, it was a lot. And I was getting increasingly high doses of chemotherapy and trying to finish high school. So that was, it was an intense time, but I have an incredible family and I learned so much from the experience that I had. I mean, one, coming from a family of Holocaust survivors, as long as I was free and safe, I had my family, I could go to school, I had doctors, I was still really lucky. And my family never let me forget that. What they went through was worse. They would have taken chemotherapy over the Holocaust any day of the week, and so I still felt really, really lucky. I had a lot still going for me. I was in all AP courses and my mom kept me very focused on okay, you have a test on Monday, but you have chemo on Fridays. So when are you going to study? So I'd have to make sure that I have my
you had a strong mom that took you by the hand and helped you through that. So did your experience influence your direction as far as going into medical school? Was that something before, something that you had always wanted to do, or was your experience with lupus a part of your mission moving forward?
Sure that it was. I mean, listen, I was always a nerd. I've always been just fascinated with all types of science, everything. I actually love all things school. So I loved writing and I loved science and I loved all those things. But definitely one of the ways that I coped with my illness was trying to understand it more. So, I would really get into my AP biology and chemistry classes, trying to understand all the physiology behind the immune system and all the chemical reactions that were taking place. And it really did set the stage then for me being able to understand the changes that happened to me when I changed my diet that allowed me to reverse the disease. And that's how we were able to even create a protocol where others will say, eat more plants, that seems to be good. We could say, no, eat these plants at this dosage because of the background I had. So my original thought was maybe I can be a genetic researcher and I can find a cure for autoimmune diseases or lupus. And I actually did start doing research. I had my last chemotherapy a week before I started college, and I got my first choice. I got a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon, which was the nerd school that I wanted to go to.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and normally they don't let you start doing genetic research till you're a junior, but I would not stop showing up at the labs asking them to let me in and do research, and they finally just let me in. So the summer after my freshman year, I started doing genetic research, even though that was not supposed to be a thing, because I just wouldn't go away. And that's what I learned from lupus is you don't know how much time you have on this earth. You can't just wait for things. You got to make them happen. So
make them happen.
I've always been very much like all in on life, that anybody, you don't know when a meteor is going to hit your house and you're gone. So, yeah.
Live life today.
I was told I had 6 months to live, and maybe I had 6 months, or maybe I had another 100 years. I didn't know, but I wasn't going to wait for anyone to give me permission for when to live. So I embraced love and laughter and dancing and studying and dreaming and science and everything I could, because why not, right? Why not go after all of it? So yeah, I was, people usually know when I'm in the room.
So I told everyone today, prepare to be inspired, and I'm already inspired. So let's talk really quickly before we get into more about autoimmune disease and all of the pieces of that, and vegan plant-based diet. But tell us when your life changed with the plant-based diet.
Yeah, so I actually became a vegetarian when I was 13. My dad read a book called Diet for New America by John Robbins, and it was actually about animal cruelty. And so but at the time, I mean, this is, 80s. Nobody ever heard of the name vegan, and even vegetarian was weird. I was in Long Island, New York. I mean, when I said I was vegetarian, people thought it was a religion, like Presbyterian, vegetarian.
Yeah, he was way out there at that point.
Yeah, and so but it was a very unhealthy diet, though. It was, anytime you would normally eat meat, eat cheese instead. And we still actually did eat fish sometimes too. It's not exactly a vegetable, but it was like, it was so hard to navigate the world then compared to now when Beyonce is raw vegan when she's on tour, that it's kind of cool now. Back then it was weird and hard to do. So it was an unhealthy diet. I ate a lot of processed foods. I ate a lot of dairy. I ate eggs every meal. I mean, it wasn't very healthy diet, but that was it set the stage for it. So I lived that way for many years, and I actually got through college maintaining a remission. Now, remission not meaning that I was healed in any way. I had to get labs every month and, sometimes adjust my meds, and I still had joint pain, but I took meds for that, and I had migraines and I took meds for that, but my kidneys were stable. So I wasn't currently dying from lupus, which is what we call remission, that I'm living, my kidneys were still losing protein in my urine, but okay, they're not failing, you're not heading to dialysis. And that was great. That was like celebratory great. So I maintained that way through college. And then I decided to kind of go against medical advice a bit, because when you've got autoimmune disease, the doctors say, avoid stress and get a lot of sleep. And so I decided to go to medical school. Where you're not going to get either one of those things. No, the other thing is avoid sunlight. Very easy to do when you live at the hospital. Yeah. But then it was very difficult. And, I had done the genetic research route, and I did genetic research for years, and I was able to help publish, and it was very interesting, but I didn't really enjoy it. I'm a very social animal, and being in the lab with the test tubes was just not my thing at all. And I knew that, maybe I won't find a cure sitting here in the lab, but I can use my experience to help other people. And one of the things I'm really good at that I thought might be my gift to the world is I know how to have a really fulfilling, happy life with chronic disease. So I thought maybe as a physician, I can help people learn how to be happy in spite of their diagnoses. That might be a cool thing to be able to do.
And we're going to be talking about the psychology of health as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
tell us when you went to a plant-based diet and what that did
I'm
for
heading
you.
there, I promise. So,
Okay.
so I go to medical school and I did get sicker at the time. I started developing blood clots. I had mini strokes. I was getting double vision from blood clots going into my brain. And so then they diagnosed a new type of lupus with antiphospholipid antibodies. They're antibodies that cause blood clots, basically. So I started taking injectable blood thinners in my belly every day, and that was supposed to be forever as well. So that was harder for me to cope with, actually, because at 16, without the internet having been invented yet, I kind of did what my doctor said and, and went about my life. But I didn't really need to know everything about what was going to happen or what it meant. As a medical student, I was very aware that at this point, my disease had advanced enough that it was going to severely impact my life. I mean, I was told I could never have children. I could have a stroke or die. From kidney failure, or other things, or the kids could have heart block or other problems, right? So I was told I couldn't have children. I knew that I was going to have a shorter life. I was probably going to be disabled by my 40s. So this was like, I got to say, I cried for 2 weeks, which for me is a long time. It was like 2 weeks of crying to my friends and letting it out. And then I was like, you know what? I'm the comeback kid. Lupus hasn't killed me yet. I'm going to be a doctor very soon. I just got my first choice of residency at UCLA-Harbor. I'm still going. So, okay, I take shots and I live. And that's what was happening to me at the time that I met my future husband, Thomas Tadlock. And so when I met him, we fell in love so fast. I mean, it was literally a month into dating where we were talking about marriage. And before I met him, I would have said too soon, that's crazy. But we would be up at night crying in each other's arms because we just couldn't hold in how much we loved each other. It was like the most overwhelming. We still do it. And it was 16 years later, we still cry if we look into each other's eyes too long. But it was an incredible experience of just souls coming together. And he brought up getting married, and I had to tell him about my disease, which was really depressing to have to do that in the moment, to say, you were the most amazing person I ever met. I would love to spend my life with you. And, I know you've noticed I take these shots, but I don't think you understand the disease I have, and that I am going to become disabled. You'll have to take care of me when I become disabled. I'm not going to live a long life. I can't have your children, and it's not a romantic proposal for a 28-year-old man to be considering that that's going to be his life, especially since I also knew that his best friend in the world died of cancer when they were 24. So it was like everyone he got close to, he could potentially lose. It was really hard, but he just immediately, he took it in and he answered me right back that I'd rather have a short life with you than a lifetime with anyone else. So let's just do this and I'll make it the best damn life you could ever have. And I was like, well, sold. So what happened was, my husband is his focus and obsession is metabolism. He's extremely well known in the fitness world for having like the fastest results in fat loss. To this day, Oprah Winfrey's trainer calls him if she needs advice. Like, he is brilliant at this. And he's also a scientist that believed that there is an optimal diet for human metabolism, that it can't be that of all the animals on the planet, we're the ones where some people are carnivores, some people are herbivores, some people, like, that makes no sense. Some people are high fat, some people are high protein, low carb. If there's a right diet for cats and there's a right diet for elephants, there's a right diet for humans. We've just gotten lost. Right? So that was his obsession. And so he was training people who were on MTV. He himself was on MTV, Hottest Body at the Beach House, but this was like 2003. I don't even know if that exists anymore, but it was hot stuff, right? He was a hot scientist, like the best you can see. Like, I only ever see scientists that hot on like TV shows like The Flash, where like, how are all these scientists so beautiful? Yeah. So he was designing nutrition to optimize fat loss or muscle building. So when you add the diet to people's exercise, the results come in weeks instead of months or years. So I said, I want to look like MTV on my wedding, right? I've got vanity.
Yes, right.
Make me look like MTV, right? And so he said, well, your diet's terrible. All that saturated fat from the eggs and the cheese, it's just making you fat. Or not that you're fat, you're beautiful, you're perfect. I'm like, don't worry, it's not a trap. It's okay. He was like, but that'll make you fatter. You're not eating enough of these other foods. So he redesigned my diet. And at the time, his diet actually included meat, because he thought at the time that you needed meat for protein, for muscles. So, but he was trying to use the cleanest meat. So it was like free range, whatever, kind of like what paleo became later. This is many years ago. But I wasn't eating meat, right? So we had to change my diet for my needs because I wasn't going to eat meat, but he'd never trained a vegetarian. So I accidentally, we'd never even heard of the term plant-based. And the only vegan I ever met scared me in college. Like he had like a giant bull ring in his nose and all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, that's extreme. So I didn't know what that was, right? So, so we accidentally created a extremely nourishing, high raw, plant-based diet without realizing that was what it was. It was just eat this, eat this. And what happened was within only a couple of weeks, I had noticed that I had extraordinary amounts of energy and all my pains were gone. And I was an intern now working I was working 30-hour shifts on a regular basis, multiple times a week, working, over 80 hours a week. At the time, they finally just passed a law that we couldn't work more than 80 hours a week. As a medical student, I was sometimes working 100 hours a week, but it was still a lot. And it's intense all day long, like saving lives, so it's really intense. And being new at it. So high level of stress. But I felt really good. I felt so good I could work a 30-hour shift and go to the gym afterwards, which people without lupus were not doing. I was actually doing so well. My chairman of my department pulled me aside because he was worried about me because all the other interns were appropriately depressed and exhausted. And I was showing up like, hey guys, isn't it a great day? And they thought maybe I was manic or something. I'm like, no, it's just great to be alive. I'm living my dream. I'm a doctor. I never thought I'd get here. And they're like, okay, cool. And so I actually ended up being the first solo chief resident of my program because I took on the job of 2 people.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing, Brooke.
But what was cool was, so after 3.5 months of changing my diet, I feel great. It worked. I lost over 20 pounds. I went from a size 11 to a size 3 in 3 months. I was ripped. I looked amazing. And when I went to my new doctors in California, because I used to be in Pennsylvania, I went to my new doctors and they couldn't find any sign of lupus. All of my labs were perfect. And they had my chart from Pennsylvania, so they knew my background, but they didn't understand it. They thought it was a mistake at the lab. So he said, go get married, come back, we'll retest you. And I came back from my marriage, for my wedding, and they retested me, and it was even better than the last time. My cholesterol, which used to be, borderline 200, was 150. I had no blood clots. I had no signs of lupus. My kidney function was normal for the first time, no protein in my urine. And that was 16 years ago. And over those years, I still kept taking my blood thinners every day for a year because everyone was afraid I was going to have a stroke. But other than that, so for 15 years now, I've been off all medication. I've had totally normal health. In fact, better than normal health. Most people don't have anywhere near the energy and vitality I have. And I'm 45 years old. Instead of being disabled at 40, I was on the cover of Fit Over 40. And
I love that so much.
Yeah, I have 2 healthy children and I live an incredible life. So, after that happened, especially after the birth of my first son, which we thought should have been impossible, that's when my husband and I changed our focus and realized we really had to understand what happened to me. And so we went back to cellular science, which we were both already familiar with, but specifically looking at what is the impact of nutrition and different kinds of nutrition on cellular function, cellular repair, and the immune system. And we realized we'd accidentally created really the most anti-inflammatory healing way of eating. And then we tested it to make sure we were right for free, just testing people like from the Lupus Foundation, anyone who would let us. And when we realized it was reproducible, that's when we brought it to the public. It was really important to both of us that we didn't share something that was an accident. Some people were like, maybe it was love. And I'm like, I would loved him for 6 months before I changed my diet and I still had lupus, but we wanted to be sure. And since then, I mean, it's like I said, I'm 16 years lupus free. We've brought this to the public. We've now helped thousands of people all over the world become free of not just lupus, but rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because I want to bring up so we have this book. I know you wrote this quite a few years ago, but you have a new book that came out during the pandemic called Goodbye Autoimmune Disease. And I thought we would just take a few minutes to talk about, I love this cover because it's like X out all of these different things, but can you give us a definition of autoimmune disease and what that means?
Absolutely. Man, I miss that bob. The pandemic made me grow it, you know. I've been my hairdresser for years. Yeah, absolutely. So autoimmune diseases are really a whole segment of different kinds of diseases that involve your immune system attacking your own body rather than doing its normal job. One of its normal jobs is to attack things like viruses, bacteria, right? So we have an inflammatory immune system that is designed to keep us safe. It's like the warriors of our system go out, seek and destroy to keep this organism safe. But with autoimmune diseases, and I understand the triggers well now, but there are triggers that happen that cause the immune system to become basically confused and to develop antibodies against self. And our antibodies are very effective at doing their job. And so depending on which antibody you have, it will cause different symptoms and then get you labels of different disease. But really on a cellular level, it's very much the same. And that's why our protocol works with all of them the same way, whether it's MS or RA, because we're actually going after the source and encouraging the body to develop the anti-inflammatory immune system and to do the cellular repair necessary to reverse it. But that's the basics of what it is. And they are very, you know, they are not only very common at this point, but they are increasing dramatically. There was new research showing that autoimmune diseases are increasing dramatically all over the world and spreading to areas of the world they didn't exist before, like Crohn's disease in the Middle East. And what they found is that they thought the geneticists who did the research were trying to see if there was a change in human genetics that was causing the increase in autoimmune diseases, if autoimmune diseases are entirely genetic, like Western medicine likes to believe. And what they found is human genetics has not changed much in the past, a few decades, but rather that the rise and spread of autoimmune diseases exactly mimics the rise and spread of the Western diet. So more and more data over time is really backing what I've been teaching for a long time, which is our diet can, our diet is one of the key factors that creates our health. It actually is the ingredients that creates our cells, including our immune cells. And so if we eat a very inflammatory, unhealthy diet, we're going to have inflamed, unhealthy cells that don't respond properly, don't work properly. But we can reverse that and change that. And we can get optimal health even years after being sick.
Well, you answered the question that I was just going to ask you about. Why is it that, it seems like everybody I know has an autoimmune disease, and it does come down to, like you said, the diet and how it is increasing around the globe. I think it's so interesting that I was doing a little research about why doctors don't talk about nutrition very much, the Western doctors anyway. And I found this stat from US News and World Report that says in recent years, obviously, that diet plays a starring role in preventing chronic disease. And yet it turns out that only 29% of US medical schools offer med students 25 hours of nutrition. Isn't that shocking?
But here's the thing, and it's really interesting, right? Interesting, but sad. When I went through my medical training, the only nutrition I remember really is if someone has diabetes, tell them not to eat sugar. If someone has heart disease, tell them not to eat butter. And that's not even fully accurate at this point. I mean, we know the key cause of diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, is saturated fat clogging insulin receptors. So it's not a don't eat sugar diet, it's a don't eat meat diet, don't eat cheese diet. And that's what the science shows, but the medical world is slow to really embrace what research is saying now. And it's not a new thing. I just did a video recently for my social media talking about how, the research that showed that smoking caused lung cancer was in like the 40s and 50s. Meanwhile, in the 50s, it was cool to smoke. Everyone's smoking. It's all over the place. It's on planes. It's everywhere, right? Doctors are smoking, right? It took many years before finally we had any kind of like the Surgeon General to say, maybe we should put a warning label. And it was like the 80s when Congress finally said we shouldn't smoke maybe in public places. So things are slow moving, when it comes to regulation and change. So research is often very far ahead. But it was very shocking to me to learn that, the research that showed that, for example, dairy turns on the promoter region of genes for cancer. That was done in the 70s. Like I was a kid, we could have had that information that could have saved my life far sooner if my mom had known what the scientists had known. And actually the scientist who figured that out, T. Colin Campbell, he wasn't allowed to publish. He had to self-publish years later in a book called The China Study because he was being shut down by, big money, basically. So it's very hard to do. But the cool thing is that it is changing. So for example, Wayne State Medical School in Michigan, they developed, the medical students themselves founded a plant-based group there, and they invite their own lecturers to come. So they tried to petition the school to change the teaching. And they actually, the medical students themselves compiled all the research on how nutrition affects disease and brought it to the school and said, can you give us a lecture on this? And they said no, because it's not on the boards. And they're like, how will it be on the boards if it's not taught? Like it's chicken or the egg, right? So they started inviting their own speakers, and I went there to speak and to teach them. I've been interviewed for our podcast by Australian medical students that started their own podcast that want to learn.
Which is fantastic.
So it is changing thanks to the internet, thanks to people like you who are doing this kind of work, that these voices are getting out there and the information is becoming known. And I've taught rooms full of over 600 healthcare providers before. I just got invited to teach a grand rounds here in Texas because these doctors are following this patient for decades who is very, very sick. She did my 6-week rapid recovery group where people work with me every single day for 6 weeks to get as healthy as they can as quickly as possible. And she reversed her disease. And when she went back to see her doctors, they couldn't believe it. So they invited me to come give a grand rounds for the hospital to teach them what the heck did I do. I could have possibly gotten this woman with autoimmune disease to heal, like her lungs healed, her skin healed.
That's amazing.
You know? So her dermatologist and her rheumatologist were talking, and they're like, we've got to have that doctor come and teach.
We got to understand what's happening.
Yeah,
and I also
so
want to
changing. It's growing.
And I want to congratulate you as well that you were just named to the advisory board for health for Forbes magazine.
Forbes Health Advisory Board. Yeah,
yes,
that was really exciting.
Congratulations, that's a big deal. So I want to talk about, we've talked about a little bit about nutrition, but I also want to talk about the emotional side of prevention and really taking on and embracing health in a way that's both mental and physical.
Absolutely. So, you know, as I mentioned, one of the key factors that affects our overall health is what we eat, because we're literally creating ourselves, right? You actually are what you eat. Unfortunately,
there's a reason why there's that saying, right?
Yeah. I used to be Chef ID. I am now Green Smoothie. That is what I am now.
Green Smoothies right here.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other things that affect our overall health is anything that can cause stress to the body. And so things like sleep, really, really important, and also emotional health. So for example, they found that people with autoimmune diseases have an extremely high rate of trauma. And I know that for sure, because in my rapid recovery groups, 80 to 90% of the people who join also have a really severe history of trauma. So there's a very clear connection between things like trauma, depression, anxiety, and inflammation. And if you've got chronic inflammation that's happening because instead of it just being because you got a viral infection, it's because of what you ate all day long, and it's because of the stress of your traumas and your depression and your anxiety, and you're constantly generating that inflammatory pathway, it's going to trigger your genes for disease. So it's very important to not only address just your diet, but your emotional health as well, if you want to have that really rapid change that I'm able to provide for people, right? So a lot of times people will say, oh, I tried to eat more plants, or I tried having a smoothie and I'm still very sick. And, you know, so a lot of times it's they're not doing it right. You know, it's not any food you eat. I have a very specific hyper-nourishing protocol. That's an intentional overdose in the nutrients your body uses for recovery, right? So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is oftentimes they're dealing with intense emotional distress. And so it's kind of like picking at a scab. You're drinking your green smoothie, trying to heal it, but then your stress and your distress is picking at that scab, keeping you sick. So what's really been profound about my life is everything I've ever experienced or learned, I use now every single day. So I'm a trauma specialist, and I teach people how to not only cope with trauma and stress, but to actually attain joy and happiness, how to be emotionally resilient. Like the people in my family have been able to be through the Holocaust and through chronic disease, to how to achieve true emotional resilience and happiness in the face of anything that you're going through, right? And happiness and depression, those are habits. Those are not just things that happen by luck, but they're based on the way you think and the way you treat yourself and your activities that you do every day. And so we can teach people the habits of happiness. And when you combine the habits of happiness with the right nutrition, Oh my gosh, it's incredible. And that's how we're able to have people who can be free of symptoms of lupus in 2 to 6 weeks. We had a guy who was 77 years old recently who completely reversed his glaucoma in 5 weeks. But when I asked him, what's the best part of your experience in my group? He said, I used to be a grouchy old man and now I'm happy. I go jogging and I think happy thoughts and I can see, So a lot of times people will tell me that when they do my group, they came in to get rid of their pain. But the best part was the emotional release, like actually feeling happy for the first time. We have someone in my group right now who has extreme health anxiety. And she posted last week that she had a full day with no anxiety for the first time ever.
That's amazing.
But every day we're working on their thoughts. And so that book you showed, Goodbye Autoimmune Disease, I wrote that to help people who, listen, Goodbye Lupus, that book you're holding, that is my story. And here's what to eat if you want and what not to eat if you want to accelerate your ability to have a healthy body, right? It's short. You can read it in a day because I want people to read action, right? But if you read that and you're not taking action, you need Goodbye Autoimmune Disease, because what that is of course, it's dozens and dozens of case studies in reversing many different diseases so people can know it wasn't just a one-off, I'm not a mutant. All these other people also have reversed their diseases. But the majority of the book is the emotional work, self-sabotage, anxiety, depression, how to let go of your old way of doing things and your old conceptions and your thoughts and feelings around food, right? And how to really embrace a life where you can have optimal happiness and productivity and really, feel blessed and lucky, even as you move through illness and try to create the health that you always wanted by eating well. So, for a lot of people, it's not just that they needed to know better to do better. It's like, oh, chips are bad for me, I won't eat them, right? No, most people eating chips know they're not good for them, but it's about, the fact that food is not just about nutrition, but it's about tradition, and it's about addiction, and it's about peer pressure and self-esteem, right? It's about comfort. Right. So as long as you think that ice cream is comfort, if we take ice cream away, you're going to be uncomfortable, right? And eventually you will have ice cream again when you get uncomfortable, versus learning real comfort, therapy and friends and exercise and all these positive things that actually heal the problem that's making you uncomfortable rather than masking it temporarily while making you sicker. So really all of that good juice that helps people in my group recover from the emotional side is what I really poured my heart into creating in my book, Goodbye Autoimmune Disease.
I'm so glad. The mental part is so much of it. And because we get so overwhelmed by everything going on in the world, particularly right now, we've just gone through COVID, which we'll be talking about in a moment. And now the war in Ukraine, it's like, it feels like this heavy cloud, but we forget that there's joy and happiness around us at all times. It's just making sure that we look for it. So you have
especially
to
now.
Especially now, it's all around us. So let's switch gears a little bit. I would love for you to talk about your protocol, Brooke, and then we'll be getting to some of the questions later and give about 10 minutes for questions. I see that there's a lot in the chat right now, but let's talk about your protocol and what that does for the human body.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned already, hypernourishment is a very specific protocol that's an intentional overdose in the nutrients your body uses for cellular repair and optimal immune function, right? Which is what we need to be healthy, right? We need our cells to be able to repair themselves, and we need our immune system to function properly. And for most people, none of that's happening. It's one of the reasons for long haul COVID, right? Everyone who's come to me so far with long haul COVID has been able to reverse their symptoms and get back to healthy again very, very quickly, usually within 3 weeks. So why is that? And so when I explain that to people, I always tell them, listen, you had just enough resources left in your body to survive COVID, but you didn't have enough left to get back to baseline, which also tells me they were on the path to illness anyway. If this is a terrible virus, it's very, very deadly virus, but if one virus took you to depletion where you still are exhausted 6 months, a year later, you were already on the path. You have used up your resources that you had in your body. So hypernourishment is a way to replenish. If you imagine that we have, the estimates are around 100 trillion cells, and you have not been eating well your whole life, you've got a lot of very hungry cells holding out empty cups. Please, may I have some more, right? There's just nothing there. And so sometimes people will try to get healthy and they'll go, cool, I'll have a smoothie and they'll have like a smaller cup, like the one you're drinking, be like, good, I'm set. And I'll tell my clients, yeah, I see people from all over the world. I do Zoom appointments and see people everywhere. And they'll say, why am I not better? I'm having like a handful of kale in a smoothie. So that's like bringing a water gun to a forest fire. You're not.
Great analogy.
The sparks are flying to the neighboring houses. It's too late for a water gun. A water gun's for a campfire, right? So we need to bring in the helicopters. We need the planes. We need the trucks. We need neighboring fire departments, right? That's what hypernourishment is. It's a really intentionally high to overdose. And so the focus is on the foods that are necessary for cells to function properly. So number one, we need high levels of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. The highest dose of that comes from cruciferous vegetables. So we have people have very high amounts of that. For it to qualify as hypernourishment, you have to be at 16 ounces a day, which for our international folks is about 454 grams, right? That's just to be able to qualify. Once people's guts start getting with the program, I will bring them higher than that because we need to get that dosage again, 100 trillion cells, right? Omega-3 fatty acids, a key component to creating the anti-inflammatory immune system. Now, if we were still, wild humans grazing on just what was growing outside, we wouldn't have to worry about that because even things like leaves have some omega-3 in them. But the problem is, in order to have a balanced immune system that functions properly, we need a balance of omega-3 to omega-6. Right. And so when you're trying to balance those two things, omega-6 is also found in super high amounts in all animal products, eggs and meat, dairy, also oil, soybean oil, canola oil, all these different oils. So you think about the standard Western diet, it is all that. So so we get almost no omega-3 at all, and then enormous amounts of omega-6. And they found that healthy people have around a ratio of like 9-to-1 or less of 6-to-3. I had a client check her ratio recently. It was 200-to-1. So what we're trying to do is really boost the omega-3 up as high as we can, as quickly as we can, and shut down the omega-6. And for people who are like, whoa, this is a lot of science coming at me quick. I have right now free classes online at goodbyelupus.com where you can spend hours of me slowly explaining this. And they're going to be free as of today. After we talk, I'm going to set them up. So I set them up for free at least once every month to 2 months so people can just absorb the info. And
it's such a great resource. Thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely. Well, I think everybody should have the right to health. So omega-3s, what I use for focus on that is flax and chia seeds. And you can start with a handful a day if it's something new to you. This is a lot of fiber to be introducing. But again, it's in detail. It's in Goodbye Lupus, but again, it'll be free in like an hour at goodbyelupus.com to just sit and learn from me. If you want to hear more of me talking, you can enjoy. It's 3 classes, what the foods that make you sick, and why, how the science works, and the foods you need for recovery, and then case studies. So anyway, so the omega-3s are really important. Flax and chia are a cheap way to get that. If you're someone who tends to be constipated or it's just too thick, too bloaty, you can always use cold pressed flax oil as well. And then hydration. It's highly ignored even in the medical world. The most common causes of dehydration, or the most common symptoms of dehydration, are headaches and constipation. And just think about how much money people spend on medicines to treat constipation and headaches. And the third thing that happens from dehydration is fatigue. So, and then think of the caffeine industry, right? So most of the time people just need water. And so for, just regular standard amount of hydration, that 64 ounces a day that the government says, for hypernourishment, I bring people up to 96 ounces or more, depending on their weight.
And can you tell people how you measure that? Because I was surprised about how much water you suggest, but tell them how it's like, what is it per pound that you should drink?
Well, it depends. So for most people, 96 ounces is a great starting point, unless you are really light, in which case an ounce per pound. But once you get to 128 pounds, a gallon of water, which is 128 ounces, right? So if you're 200 pounds, don't drink 200 ounces. It's usually 96 ounces to 128 ounces. Although I drink more than my body weight in water, because this is my gallon jug, and I have water in my smoothies too. And I'm under 120 and so it's not a big deal. But if you're not used to being super hydrated, sometimes people can get a little woozy if they're overdoing it. So, just 96 ounces is usually a good starting point for people. And so those are the components. I mean, you need water for optimal metabolism, which was one thing that my husband discovered. And he has his own best-selling book, Miracle Metabolism, all about how you would apply this to fitness. But it's necessary for all the chemical reactions that you would use to optimize your metabolism, which is also necessary for optimizing human health. And so a lot of times when people are sick or even overweight and they feel like they're doing everything they can and nothing's working, it's because they're not drinking their water. And so you need that as well.
So Brooke, if you're not in the process of hyper-nourishing right off the bat, like, if you put somebody who has a disease that they're dealing with and they're hyper-nourishing right off the top, that's one thing. But for someone, who is pretty healthy but wants to eat your diet, can you explain to us what that would include?
Not sure that I fully understand your question, but I'm going to give you an answer anyway. So there's different ways to do this. So one would be hypernourishment is something you can add to any diet, right? So when I'm talking about adding those nutrients, and by the way, that's raw cruciferous or spinach, that counts because it's super high nourishment, right? So you can add that to any diet, even a standard Western diet, even a McDonald's diet. If you add hypernourishment, the easiest way to add it is to make a green smoothie. Most people who are not used to eating vegetables do not want to eat huge amounts of salads. But if you throw it in the blender with some flax or chia seeds, and then you put in like frozen mango, banana, and make it taste delicious, they'll drink it down. But you have to really load it up with the greens, right? And we have free recipes online as well to help people just, my husband made a whole site, just free resources for people to help them with this, called smoothieshred.com. So you go there, you make your big smoothie and you drink it by the end of the day. No matter what else you ate that day, you got your nourishment in. And that's already going to start making a difference in your health. One, you'll have glorious bowel movements. Two, you will have an increase in your energy and vitality. You're going to feel a lot different. You'll be more resilient to things like infections. Your blood pressure may come down. All of these wonderful things will start to happen. Now, there is a peak effect to that. So if you are having a big green smoothie and then hamburgers, you're going to peak out at how much benefit you're going to get. But what I've found is when people start adding that to their diet, I call it the gateway drug to healthy eating. You have a big green smoothie, you feel really good. Then you have a burger and you're like, right? And you go, wait, maybe I want more greens then. Maybe I'll have a salad instead, right? So people start to naturally gravitate towards the healthier foods. If you're overall healthy and you want to optimize your ability to just continue to stay healthy, one of the best things you can do is have your hypernourishment, have your smoothies and your raw foods, and anything cooked you eat is plant-based. So, beans and quinoa and grains and oats and, stuff like that, cooked vegetables, potatoes, all that kind of stuff, that if you have, high raw intake and you're also eating those plant foods and you're staying away from the oils, you're really going to optimize your ability to continue to be healthy. And it's one of the awesome things that they've really tested is plant-based diets actually do reverse the aging of organs and even DNA. Dr. Ornish did a study where he found that, our DNA tends to shorten over time, and that's aging, right? And so there's a little tail at the end of our DNA that we expect to get shorter over time. And it's just nonsense because we expect it to get cut over time during the replication process. But once it starts cutting into healthy DNA that we need, we start to age because we're missing out on important information. But we've thought, when I was trained in my genetic days, genetic research days, and even in medical school, that telomeres only get shorter over time. That's aging, that's normal. What he found is plant-based eaters, actually telomeres can lengthen again. What? So we can get years back. Water, if you're dehydrated, you accelerate the aging of your organs, both internal and external, right? So when you're looking at hypernourishment, what you're really doing is you're optimizing your ability to repair damage inside and outside. People often really love the skin benefits, I'm 45 and people usually don't think that. And so, when you start to really nourish yourself well, you will have all the organs, including the external skin organ, really start to look healthy. Your hair grows like a weed. Everything is optimized and you're literally reversing the aging process. So for people who are sick, they're going to have to repair and heal from the disease first. If you're already healthy, well, you just get the other benefits like amazing energy and anti-aging and resilience to infection. I mean, with COVID, we've had really awesome research that was done. One was done in the beginning of the pandemic that was published by the British Medical Journal that showed that doctors and nurses that called themselves plant-based had a 70% lower rate of moderate to severe COVID compared to everyone else. 70% lower.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
not
and
surprising
then they looked at doctors and nurses that said they were high protein, low carb, like paleo or keto, they had almost a 50% higher rate of moderate to severe COVID. So eating any kind of meat, even pescatarians had a higher rate. They had a 50% reduction instead of a 70% reduction. So even adding something like fish lowered the protection that you would get from just eating plants alone from infections. And again, what it comes down to is if you want your immune system to function optimally, you need to nourish yourself well, which plant eaters tend to do better. And you have to stop causing the damage that any animal products will cause. So the COVID research has been really interesting. And then on top of that, last week, Johns Hopkins came out with a study that showed that cruciferous vegetables cut DNA replication of COVID and cold viruses in half. So when you think about hypernourishment, where you're eating a pound of cruciferous vegetables a day, you are actually decreasing this virus's ability to replicate itself. So when you look at the power of that eating meat made people more likely to get moderate to severe COVID. And on top of that, cruciferous vegetables stop the virus from replicating by 50%. Now you're creating an environment where, just the current research on COVID alone really emphasizes what I've been doing for 15 years.
For 15 years. I mean, I saw that on your Instagram account the other day, and I was just going to ask you about that. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. But modern medicine, like you said, is starting to see what you've been talking about, and others like, John Robbins and so many other people on the benefits of, being hydrated, eating plant-based. So let's go into some questions here. So one person asked, when you drink water, is it just plain water or is it filtered?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's filtered usually out of the fridge, but I can tell you when I was reversing my lupus, I was a poor intern. I couldn't even meet rent in LA without my boyfriend at the time sending me money. So I was not eating anything organic, and I would refill my water bottle out of the bathroom in the hospital. Okay, not the toilet, the sink. But I'm just saying that vegetables and water work, even if you have to use the kind with pesticides and you don't have a filter. You do not need to invest in like a home filtration system that's like, alkaline. Is that good for you? Sure, it's great, but it's not necessary if your diet's alkaline, right? So yeah, whatever water you can get is better than no water. But yeah, I mean, I have a filter thing now. Just my husband bought one just because I didn't like the taste of the water here. I'm a native New Yorker, and we're kind of snobby about the taste of our water because surprisingly, New York water is really delicious.
That's amazing. So let's talk about, I've seen on your Instagram feed just about cost. So let's just talk about organic versus regular and what you would recommend for most people. It's just getting in the vegetables regardless, right?
You can afford to eat organic, it's better. I mean, I'd rather not eat pesticides, and organic produce is grown in better soil that has more nutrients in it. So you're getting more bang for your buck. If you're having all of those greens, they have more vitamins in them and minerals because they have better soil. That said, if it's a choice between no kale or just regular pesticide kale, eat the kale, right? So I'm not really picky. Like if I go to a restaurant and I have a big salad, I know it's not organic, and I'm not, crying tears as my dressing into the salad. Like I'm like, all right, I'll just eat it. It doesn't matter. And I healed on regular. So the best you can do. There are things you can Google, like the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which tell you like which produce tends to have the most pesticides. That's usually what I do is, like my avocados, they don't really get much pesticide penetration.
But strawberries do.
Right? So, if you can get organic greens, that's a good place to start. But Costco sells these bags of 24 ounces of power greens for less than you would get like a 16-ounce container at a regular supermarket. So there's always ways. When I was in California, I used to go to the farmer's market. So again, very poor. I'd go to the farmer's market 30 minutes before it closed. And then I would just ask them, how much to take everything you have left? And sometimes for 10, 15 bucks, I'd get 3-4 bags of groceries. I wouldn't even know what it all was. I'd just put it in the blender. I'm like, what's this? I don't know. It's green. I'll blend it, see what it tastes like.
So someone was asking Brooke about Crohn's and PCS. Will it help?
I've actually had really amazing success with Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, also like IBS. A lot of times when people have bowel disruption, their doctor will give them the worst advice, which will be avoid all fiber and just eat white stuff. And so they start eating just bread and, pasta and maybe a sweet potato because they're trying to deal with the symptom. But meanwhile, they're now becoming more and more malnourished, which then fuels the disease, as well as it's an autoimmune disease. And, there was even a study looking at mice with lupus where they showed that fiber alone reverses symptoms of lupus in mice, right? So we need fiber. There's so many reasons why the vegetables work, right? The vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, all those things. So when you remove all of that, symptomatically, they might feel better in the moment, but they are getting sicker. And of course, when you follow general medical advice and you have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, eventually you get parts of your colon removed. So it's not like it works. If it worked, that'd be better, right? But it doesn't work. But I call that hair of the dog, which I heard is really just a New York phrase, hair of the dog that bit you. It's like if someone has a hangover from drinking too much alcohol, if you give them a shot of vodka or beer, their hangover symptoms go away. But they didn't fix the poisoning of the alcohol. You actually
right, exactly.
So that's like what we tell people with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's and other bowel diseases is, oh yeah, just don't eat any fresh vegetables or fruits and stuff. Just eat, processed crap. Okay, so it's hair of the dog that bit you. They feel better in the moment, but they're actually getting sicker. And so I've been able to put people on these high fiber diets. I had somebody in my last rapid recovery group with ulcerative colitis who was symptom free within a few weeks, no more blood in his stool, no more diarrhea, constipation issues. And he was crying in our last meeting because he's like, this saved my life. I can't believe it. And I've had someone with Crohn's who was literally a few weeks away at 21 from getting his colon removed completely. And I was able to get him back where the pain went away, the bleeding went away, and he doesn't have to have the surgery. Depending on how intense the bowel symptoms are, I do have to go more slowly sometimes. Sometimes I have to rest the bowel first. I'll do like a juice fast to rest it. I do not recommend juice fasting for disease reversal, but it's kind of like ice and elevate your ankle, if you break it. So, some people can jump right into hypernourishment and drink the smoothies and they pass right through and they do well. And others, I have to kind of work them up to it. But the goal is to get on a healing diet. You need your vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and omega-3s, and that's going to heal the autoimmune disease. So it's really remarkable how well it works. And so many people come to me and they're low FODMAP, low fiber diets, and of course, still sick. And they're terrified of broccoli.
Right.
Oh my God. And then meanwhile, they get better. Yeah.
So Brooke, there's so many questions in the chat for you, and I
I'll
think
try to rapid fire them.
but I think what we should do is have you talk about your 6-week program, because people are going to get much more information there specific to them. And so tell us when that starts and what people. I know you've talked about it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I have a 6-week rapid recovery group that is, I think, well, it's definitely the most popular thing I do right now. So if you haven't yet overdosed on me yet, then it could.
I don't think anybody would do that.
Oh, thank you. If you hate the sound of my voice, you will hate this program because every day for 6 weeks, what we do is we put you on the most aggressive form of the nutrition protocol. So you are only eating hypernourishment. So you are focusing on the ingredients that are for cellular recovery, right? So it's a difficult way to eat, at least until you get used to it. One of my clients said it's hard till it's easy, which is life. Right? So it's a very strict nutrition protocol where we look every day at your food. You actually have to show us every day what you ate, and we coach you until you get on the protocol and are doing it correctly and are getting results. And if someone needs adjustments based on food sensitivity, based on bowel issues, based on whatever it is that's going on, we make those adjustments every single day. And then in addition to that, every day they are watching me talk to them to overcome all the psychological barriers to those changes, to teach them about joy and happiness, to help them overcome self-sabotage. And then we have weekly Zoom meetings where we stay on until every single person who wants it gets coaching. We're often on for 4 hours or more, helping people through their health anxiety, through all the different issues that are coming up in their life so that they can really embrace the nutrition and get to what they want. So it's a very intense lifestyle transformation program. It's not just here, eat this, don't eat that. Most people join and said they have no idea, like they've never been in such an intensive group. We do it actually through Facebook, but it's in a secret group. But people, they think that, it's going to be like people just posting. Oh no, it is a really intensive and personal transformation process where each person gets attention from us. So we have another group that starts May 20th. They always sell out because we have to limit, the numbers.
You have so much info. I want to just invite everybody to go to your various resources, which we've listed in the chat. There's so much information there. There is a chat on your smoothie shred that has other people actually answering their experience, so you can kind of look and see how other people's stories have gone and what they've encountered. So I would highly recommend, here are all of her resources right here, actually. So Brooke, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I'm just so inspired and encouraged by your message, and I just hope that we can get it out to more and more people. So thank you for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.